Hello and welcome back. I'm Kriti Mehta. You're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Through a post on Truth Social, US President Donald Trump announces the deployment of border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota while attacking Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Federal officials are standing firm on their account of the Minneapolis shooting as video evidence appears to contradict key elements of their narrative. The case intensified political scrutiny, public anger, and renewed debate over federal law enforcement accountability in the U.S. Protesters gather in Minneapolis to demand federal immigration agents leave after a 37-year-old man was fatally shot by Border Patrol, intensifying local outrage. Governor Tim Walz calls on President Trump to withdraw the agents as demonstrations and political tension grow over the incident. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney is likely to visit India in the early March as Ottawa steps up efforts to diversify trade away from the United States, focus on agreements on uranium energy, critical minerals, AI, and quantum computing. The Kremlin on Monday said the U.S. trilateral talks in the UAE between Russia and Ukrainian negotiators had been held in a constructive spirit, but that there was significant work ahead still. Philippines authorities are searching for survivors after a passenger ferry sinks in southern waters, leaving at least 18 dead and many still missing. European Union investigates Elon Musk's social media X over whether Grok violated rules and disseminated illegal content such as manipulated sexualized images in the European Union. A private jet carrying 8 crashed in flames as it was taking off from a Mane airport with 8 aboard, but their fate and identities are not yet known. And viewers, in some fresh news that we are bringing you, a post on Truth Social from US President Donald Trump is now announcing the deployment of Tom Homan to Minnesota. Homan is Trump's border czar, known for his work in immigration enforcement. He will be reporting directly to Donald Trump, the US president. While Homan has not previously worked in Minnesota, Trump emphasized his strong reputation and fairness, stating Homan knows and likes many people in the region. This move comes as anti-ICE protests continue to escalate following the fatal shooting of a Minneapolis man by Border Patrol agents. Trump also mentioned an ongoing investigation into a massive $20 billion welfare fraud case in Minnesota, linking it to the recent unrest. Furthermore, Trump highlighted a probe involving Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, alleging discrepancies between her financial status and her past. Joining me now in this discussion is Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, who is a foreign affairs, security and strategy analyst joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Collins, thanks very much for joining me. Firstly, what do we know? Thanks for joining once again. What do we really know about Homan? Now Trump is calling him a czar, really, border czar, and what can we expect with his deployment?
Well, we have seen how the incident has raised further tensions, and of course, it has been a systemic, issue. And we have seen how also the responses from the Minnesota officials have been strong, and criticizing the extent of the actions being taken, and also demanding the withdrawal of the federal agents. And this is going to, of course, prolong without, further credible, actions or, the narratives being sent to quell these rising, tensions and dissatisfactions. We've seen also these, protesters and, public unrest, and this is taking much more of a divisive partisan line. And of course, the narratives have been set, the arguments have been set on both sides as to the actions being taken, but the community anger over this back-to-back incidents, the call for accountability, but the parallel arguments from the other side saying that in reacting to the exact detail of the situation as to how there have been disputes on whether weapons have been shown, have been brandished to incur such reactions. But this is going again, as I've stated, it's not a recent issue. This has been ongoing for decades now in terms of the actions being taken by law enforcement units, and how traditionally this has been a point of contention by both sides. But I don't see this to be yet another factor for the Trump administration to backtrack. And of course, I foresee that the current administration will also, outline the true, outlines the timelines of the incidents, and that they need to be seen as strong in terms of the core issue of illegal immigrants, and also on the works being done by the ICE agents, and all the past actions and past legacies of ICE also, especially under the purview of the Trump administration. So I don't foresee that with this sustained tensions or community anger, that will force a much bigger backtrack by the Trump administration. But of course, there will be some further evaluations of the tactics or the actions being taken. But I foresee that there will be some changes in terms of how in the future engagement with the people, with the immigrants, or with the public will be held, to ensure that these things will not happen, or again in the future.
Right, Collins, thank you for your comment. I request you to stay on. We now move on, viewers. Now, German Foreign Minister Johann Waitful on Monday criticized Russia's stubborn insistence on territorial issues following last week's trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi with Russian, Ukrainian and US envoys. Waitful warned that without flexibility from Moscow, negotiations could take much longer or fail at this stage. He emphasized that the territorial issue remains a major sticking point in efforts to resolve the Ukrainian conflict, and called for the constructive engagement from all parties to achieve meaningful progress. Collins requested to join me back in the discussion here. Of course, the European leaders will attack Russia as far as the peace dialogue is concerned, and Russia's what many are saying maximalist demands. But Russia, of course, is hell-bent on its Anchorage formula, which means for Ukraine to cede its territory. What really do you think can be the outcomes from these trilateral talks, and if peace is anywhere near in sight?
Yeah, we have seen how the statement is less about rhetoric but more about setting red lines. This is a signal from Berlin that any peace framework in the future must not be at the expense of territorial integrity of Ukraine, and hence the territorial integrity of Europe as a whole. So this is unacceptable to Germany, to Europe, and this reflects a much more hardened stance by Europe on the consensus that territorial integrity and national sovereignty are the core fundamentals that cannot be negotiated, regardless of economic costs, regardless of war fatigue. So Germany is now pushing back quite hard against Russian maximalism, and that this is also in line with the need by Europe to show a hardened stance in order to defend the interests of Ukraine, which is now linked to the security and defense of Europe as a whole. So this marks a shift from Germany's posture, from a more values-based response now to a more security-driven stance, and to portray this hardened European stance opposing Russian actions. And of course also this will also compel other European nations to have similar stance and sentiments. But the key fundamental will be, of course, peace cannot be conditional on the basis of legitimizing force, and this is afraid this is Berlin is also wary of the fact that this might set a precedent far beyond Ukraine, and this will affect the future security of Germany and Europe as a whole. So now Germany is saying clearly that there can be some compromises in terms of agreements on the peace process, in terms of the deadlines or the timelines, or maybe the content on the security guarantees, and maybe the sanctions and all that. but not on sovereignty, not on territorial integrity, not on the rights of Ukraine to have to have these regions and the territories that belong to them, and not to be compromised by any actions by Russia. So this is a new shift. But again, as I've stated, I don't foresee the impact of Germany's responses to the entire peace process and peace agreement. Most importantly will be the role being played by President Trump and Washington, and the trilateral peace process involving Ukraine, Russia, and the U.S. I don't foresee the extent or the depth or the volume of the role or the impact of Europe, or whether Germany, whether France, to have any kind of profound impact on derailing the entire peace process, with the greater role being played, the influence being played by the Trump administration as a whole. So I don't foresee that to derail the whole process.
Right, Collins, thanks once again here for your comments. Request you to stay on as we move ahead, viewers. There's some breaking news now coming in. In fact, the Israeli military has confirmed that it has recovered the remains of Israeli police officer Ran Juili, the last hostage held in Gaza. His return marks the completion of a key condition in U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to end the Gaza war. This development follows the handover of Thai agricultural worker Sud Thisakurin Thalak in December 2023, with Juili's remains now returned. The recovery of all hostages, both living and deceased, marks a significant milestone in the ongoing war. All right. And now moving on, viewers, some news from China, where President Xi Jinping has moved to strengthen ties with Vietnam in a phone call with its newly reappointed leader, To Lam. This was the first contact between the two leaders since To Lam was unanimously confirmed to lead Vietnam's ruling Communist Party for another 5 years. Chinese state media said Xi emphasized deeper cooperation between Beijing and Hanoi on regional and global issues and called for stronger communication and mutual trust. The call comes despite a long history of mistrust and territorial disputes between the two countries, including over the South China Sea. At the same time, Vietnam has been expanding its engagement with the United States, even as China and the US maintain a fragile tariff truce. She also warned of global risks and said both sides must work to manage challenges and avoid confrontation, signaling Beijing's intent to keep Vietnam close as regional competition intensifies. All right, Collins requested to join me back in the discussion here. Of course, Vietnam is a communist country, and ties with China are expected to be rather good. But with the To Lam taking over the country, what changes, if any, we can expect?
Well, Vietnam will continue to to hedge, and of course also the policy of Vietnam has always been to seek strategic alignment. Not an outright alliance with any other party. Of course, he has been treating China as a critical partner, closest neighbor. Of course, also trying to have these deeper friend-sharing efforts with the West, especially with the US. And Vietnam is viewed with great importance by Beijing in terms of being a strategic power in the southern flank. And also, of course, we've seen how it remains an important swing state in Southeast Asia. So Beijing wants to keep Vietnam close to its orbit in all aspects, in economic terms and of course in geopolitical terms, and to prevent Vietnam from falling into the influence of other Western countries, especially the US. So we have seen how the bamboo diplomacy concept of Vietnam and the four no's, no alliance, no outright military alliance with other powers, and no use of force and all that. So these have been seen to be great to be good by Beijing in terms of keeping Vietnam as it is. And of course, Hanoi is also looking forward for greater economic collaboration with Beijing, but also at the same time has been wary of the actions by Beijing, especially in South China Sea. And Vietnam is not, is not afraid to show a credible show of force if needed as a deterrence against China in South China Sea. But this outreach is also meant as a key messaging tool to Southeast Asia that China is a partner and is looking to extend this partnership beyond other sectors, including on economic relationship, but of course also Vietnam's rise and the importance of Vietnam to both powers, to both Beijing and Washington, has been profound, and that with this new National Congress in Vietnam, and with the consolidation of power by Tholam, we will foresee that it will continue to have this kind of strategic hedging with both powers. But I foresee that at the same time also Tholam will continue to also seek greater defense ties with the US, as an insurance, as a key fallback option, while at the same time, again, not to send a wrong message to Beijing and to President Xi. And Tholam will continue to have this, to have a deeper economic partnership. And of course, it cannot be seen, or you cannot afford to have this, a new ties that will be strained by wariness. And of course, they both share the same ideological narratives. And China will still remain an important economic partner to Vietnam, especially with the new transition towards this new 2030 vision, 2045 vision, which will need greater economic support from external powers, especially from China, with regards to whether supply chain resilience or energy transition, infrastructure connectivity, and Vietnam is seen as the key gateway to Southeast Asia in that regard. So I don't see any deterioration of economic ties between both powers, but on security and military terms, I foresee that the US will continue to remain largely in the radar of Vietnam, but again, this will be done under the mantra and concept of strategic hedging, not an outright alliance. And this status quo will continue at least for the years to come, especially under the leadership of Tholam.
Right, Collins, thanks very much once again. Moving on, viewers, let's cover some news from Indonesia, which has received its first 3 Rafale fighter jets from France as part of a multi-billion-dollar defense deal. The delivery marks a significant upgrade to Indonesia's aging military fleet. The aircraft, manufactured by Dassault Aviation, were confirmed by the country's defense ministry to be ready for use by the Indonesian Air Force. They arrived at Rosemin Nurjadin Air Base in Pekanbaru, Sumatra. As part of the $8 billion deal signed in 2020, Indonesia has placed an order for up to 42 Rafales along with French frigates and submarines. Indonesia has been actively seeking to enhance its defense capabilities with several other options under consideration, including China's J-10 and the US-made F-15X fighter jets. Alright, now moving ahead, viewers, this week Meta, TikTok and YouTube are facing legal action in California Superior Court over allegations that their platforms have contributed to a mental health crisis among youth. The case centers on a 19-year-old woman identified as KGM, who claims she became addicted to social media at a young age, leading to worsened depression and suicidal thoughts. KGM is seeking to hold these tech companies accountable, asserting that their platforms were intentionally designed to harm mental health. Lawyers argue that this is the first trial in which major tech companies must defend themselves against claims of causing harm to young users. Meta's CEO Mark Zuckerberg is expected to testify, while Snap CEO Evan Spiegel has opted to settle. Meanwhile, YouTube contends that its platform differs from Instagram and TikTok in its impact on youth mental health. Dr. Bhavna Barmi, clinical psychologist from New Delhi, joins me in this discussion. Dr. Bhavna, thanks very much for joining us. Firstly, how do you see the case itself? This is the first time that a teenager has come out and filed a legal suit alleging that these social media platforms, including YouTube as well, contributed to her deteriorating mental health and worsened her depression. Do you really think it's going to set a precedent in the right direction?
You know, what I would say is that, yes, mental health challenges are associated with adolescent social media use. And there are a lot of emotional and mood-related challenges that take place. I would like to bring to our focus that there is increased anxiety due to constant comparisons evaluations, and fear of missing out, what we all know as FOMOs. Depressive symptoms are linked to perceived inadequacies, rejection, sensitivity, and even validation dependence. Along with this, on the mental health forum, there is a lot of mood instability and irritability from emotional overstimulation and sleep deprivation, which is evident. So what is very important is that we need to actually understand that there are a lot of self-concept and identity-related challenges that can come about, which are surfacing. So there is low self-esteem that comes about by metric-based self-worth, which is like, how many likes do I have? How many followers do I have? How many views do I have? There is a lot of mental health related to body image dissatisfactions due to exposure to idealized and filtered representations. There is also what we call in psychology identity diffusion, as external feedback replaces internal self-definition and self-worth. So I feel there are a lot of cognitive and behavioral challenges which come about. There's reduced attention span, difficulty with sustained focus, a lot of compulsive checking behaviors, resembling something like behavioral addiction patterns. Procrastination and academic disengagement due to attentional fragmentation. There is also a lot of social and interpersonal challenges. Heightened peer pressure and conformity. Superficial connections replacing deep relational bonds. So there's increased loneliness despite higher perceived connectivity.
Yeah.
So
Right.
one does need to look at all this when we are looking at very rightly what you are saying. And of course, mental health challenges are coming more than ever before.
All right. What do you think really can be done to upend these challenges that now come up from social media? Many countries have already moved to ban social media usage for teens. But for those countries that still allow the usage for minors, what really do you think should be done as far as parental supervision is concerned, or community supervision is concerned, whether in schools or other institutions?
I would like to say is that there is a lot of strong psychological evidence that says that family dynamics, school and peers are primary risk or even protective factors. So we need to focus on the strong evidence which says psychologically that secure attachments, emotionally responsive caregiving, supportive school climates and healthy peer belonging are going to buffer against anxiety and depression. And conversely, if we see emotional neglect, high academic pressure, authoritarian or invalidating family systems, or chronic peer rejections, create a kind of a baseline vulnerability. So when we look at digital media, it is going to be best understood as a risk amplifier, which intensifies these existing insecurities, which externalizes peer hierarchies, which makes comparison constant, quantified, and also sometimes inescapable. If a child is psychologically resilient, social media may be annoying or neutral. But what is to be understood is that if a child is already vulnerable, it becomes pathogenic. So, you know, what I'm saying is, think of social media like air pollution. It causes weak lungs, but it devastates people who already have them. So we definitely need to get some legislations into place. And these are very, very important. Like you're already saying that there are certain places where these legislations are being put into account. And that is something that we should be able to think of. You know, so if we are looking at what bans can do, I would say that bans can actually, one, delay exposure during the critical neurodevelopmental windows. Two, it can reduce the baseline usage. Three, it signals social accountability and responsibility, and it forces platform accountability. So to understand that these can be preventive, yet we need to still teach emotional regulation. We still need to fix family systems. We still need to improve school environments. We need to replace social belonging. And we need to address underlying distress. So I would say what actually would work would be an evidence-aligned approach where we design regulation. So there should be no infinite scroll for minors, for example. No algorithm personalization for children under 18. A default time limit and stopping cues should be generated. And I think very importantly, digital literacy as psychological literacy is important. Teaching our children, especially adolescents, how persuasion, comparison, and reward systems work. So this meta-awareness is going to reduce the harm. Our family-level interventions are very, very important. You know, the parent emotional coaching, the media co-regulation, not just surveillance, is going to be important.
Right.
So I think it's a very multifaceted approach that we need.
Right. Well, we'll watch out, Dr. Burmi, how those proceedings go, and if any recommendations or regulations can come out for the social media giants to take on. But for now, thanks very much for joining me in this discussion. It was a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure completely.
And now, moving ahead, viewers, there's some news coming in from Greece, where a fire has erupted following an explosion at a biscuit factory near Trikala in central Greece, killing at least 3 people and leaving 2 others missing. 8 of the 13 workers escaped while investigators and disaster response teams arrived at the scene. 6 people, including a firefighter, were treated in hospital for respiratory issues, but none are in life-threatening condition, as per officials. The factory owner, Violanta SA, said the cause of the blast remains unclear. Authorities are continuing search and rescue operations as they investigate the incident. And viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For more news updates from around the world.